Please welcome Senior Vice President and Product Development, Cloud Services, VMware, Ajay Patel.
Good afternoon. We did a little poor job of scheduling. We have a roadmap session going at the same time as this session, so I can clearly see the impact of that. So for those of you who made it to my session, thank you for joining. I'm Ajay Patel. I'm part of the vCloud Air product or cloud services team. I'm going to start with to lighten up after the afternoon as we come off from lunch. I'll start with a good analogy, right? Think you're the fourth richest man in Silicon Valley. You happen to have bought the island of Lanai. You want to start putting a little resort up there because you're used to the comfort of home. Lanai is a beautiful place, but doesn't have the nice resort that he's looking for, right? He starts to build a resort, quickly finds that, just getting things back and forth from the mainland onto the island is a little bit of a bear. He starts thinking about, hey, I need to build a bridge. I probably need some, tools and infrastructure to get things working. Hopefully the same tools and infrastructure I use on the mainland, I can just bring them over and apply them there on the island as well. Starts to think about, if I need to bring the guests, I probably need a similar security policy I have for all my beautiful homes that I have rest of the world. I want to have the same consistent security model, same security policies. Ideally, I like to have a common management so that the same management company that knows how to manage my homes everywhere, I can manage my island as well. You get the idea quickly that in an enterprise landscape, no app is really an island. Every app, whether it's an old app, a traditional app that you have on-prem, or one of the new systems of engagement apps you're building, they all need connectivity back to your enterprise. None of these apps are a silo. They're integrated into the overall landscape that you work in. The nature of apps themselves have changed. When you think about an e-commerce application now, that's no longer just a website. It's a dynamic environment for interacting with the rest of your business. If you think about the APIs you're publishing, they're exposing the business functionality that you own to others to use, to connect with, to integrate with. The reality is we're living in a connected world. But more importantly, any cloud assets we leverage in a public cloud is equally connected back to the enterprise. And so our basic premise and our view is that most enterprise IT will be of some form of hybrid application. How many of you attended the keynote this morning? You saw the example of a hybrid application with mobile being a good entry point. And I see one of my partners here from Kinway, and as well as you'll see some of the other use cases. You'll start to see that this nature of being able to expose and simplify development for building this next generation composite apps that are highly integrated, leveraging SaaS services, leveraging on-prem assets, is just the reality of new world of IT, right? And you need to start thinking about in this connected world, this integrated world, how are you going to start building new applications? How are you going to leverage new services and develop applications that are much more agile, leveraging some of the new best practices? But it's not one of, I'll build new greenfield apps here, I'll keep my traditional apps here, and they both will be silos, right? They're connected, they're integrated, they need common data. You need a way to deliver this value very quickly. So if I go through that, I'll walk through a simple life cycle of how do we see customers leveraging a public cloud, right? At the very basic, this is where VMware is very strong at, right? We're very good as an infrastructure company. This is what people love us about. But as you start to move in terms of new world, it's all about applications, less about infrastructure. We'll walk through the life cycle of how our customers are building applications. What do they need to get an environment spun up? What do they need from a development toolchain perspective? How do I move to things like continuous integration, continuous delivery? What other services do I need to build these new applications? I'll walk through a little bit of a life cycle and in the process highlight some of the roadmap items or the capability that we have today with vCloud Air. So hopefully you get a taste of both current capability but also how our customers are starting to leverage vCloud Air and our SDDC infrastructure for delivering on this value proposition. So let's start by kind of the first basic use case we see most of our customers leveraging vCloud Air for. And the first basic use case is kind of building that bridge. How do I take a public cloud resource and make it an extension of my data center? How do I make it really simple so that I can spin up a VM on demand versus having to rack and stack and stand up physical hardware? How do I just make sure that the same vCenter, vSphere client that I use can simply access resources, those exact compatible resources, on a public cloud without having to go through all the infrastructure build-out that typically is required? Effectively, how do I leverage a virtual private cloud on demand? How do I make it such that it is part of an extension of my data center. And this is really exactly what vCloud Air has provided. We have a VPC on demand model, which really simplifies the consumption, gives you the flexibility of choice of consuming cloud resources on demand. It is a self-service multi-tenant cloud, which you can now tap on demand for resources that are identical, very compatible to the exact data center resources that you have. It gives you the instantly provisionable resource infrastructure, but unlike our competitors, it's not in a fixed t-shirt sizes. You don't have to go figure out exactly whether it's an M1, M2, L1, L2, large, small. You figure out the resource pool the way you figure out a resource pool on your enterprise and can resize them to fit your need. Just simply that factor, you can save cost and money because you're not overspending or overcommitting, quote unquote, the size of your VM templates when you get started. So this notion of having a resource pool that you carve out, the way you carve out your on-prem resources, having the same kind of overcommit capability that you have for your on-prem resources, being able to manage that through a single pane of glass, your vSphere tools that you're used to, the vCenter tools they're used to, is a compelling value proposition. Having said that, one of the big things we learned here was customers want to buy or use this resource, depends on where you are in the enterprise. If you're a line of business, you're trying to do some quick project, you may still want to use a credit card, which is the Amazon model. However, most of our larger enterprises don't allow customers or the employees to start spending on the corporate credit card, and most procurement shops are coming and putting this to a halt. They want to have some kind of purchasing agreement with the cloud provider to get the economics of pooling the spend across multiple departments, multiple users. So we have a very simple model, what I call a gift card model. The real name is SPP, but the idea is think of it like a gift card or a corporate credit card that we set a pool of cloud credits to the enterprise, and the enterprise can then burn them down against any set of resources, whether it's an infrastructure resource or a partner service that's running on vCloud Air. So really simplifying this consumption model, being able to purchase these credits either on a committed basis, in a prepaid basis, or in arrears through our credit card. We've really made it simple to commercially transact and consume these cloud resources. Again, no upfront resource or commitments, flexible consumption model, being able to pay as you go and build any application, whether it's a traditional application that you're running a workload, you're migrating a workload on, or you're building a net new application. This is really the best of both worlds with an infrastructure that you already use on-prem extended into the data center. A couple of new announcements that you may have caught. Some of the big, if you looked at some of the Gartner has a IaaS detailed requirements list where they evaluate what an MVP is, if you will, for an IaaS infrastructure. The two missing gaps, being a new young service, we've been in the service for about 2+ years, were two big missing pieces for us were kind of an RDS competitor or a database SQL service, right? And we didn't have an object store. Those are the two reasons why we were behind Azure in terms of capability or clearly behind Amazon given their functional scope. But in going through those two capability set, by adding those, we're now above Google in terms of infrastructure capability, neck to neck with Azure and behind Amazon. That just tells you from a breadth of functionality, vCloud Air within 2.5 years has all the IaaS capabilities you need to leverage against in an enterprise workload scenario. And the two missing pieces were the object store capability and the database service. And both are now being launched at this VMworld. So I'm pretty excited to let you know that this combined set of capability of infrastructure with the growing palette of services gives us a really strong competitive position in the market. On the object store, I'll touch on a few things. We have two offerings here. We have an offering from Google, which we're reselling. And it's really driven by the fact that they are the price leader. So if you're looking for a pure play, just price is your primary driver, Google provides you the best price point out there. It's a utility service. Think about that, a utility in the cloud that you can tap for persistent object store, usually developer-driven for web logs, web analytics. Those are the typical use cases, whereas the EMC Viper service is much more rigor towards larger enterprise deployments. It's co-located with our vCloud Air data centers, has a better latency profile. It has a better availability profile, given we can manage that locally. It also allows us to start to provide you more compliance, more security, data sovereignty, those kinds of things. So we've given you the two ends of the spectrum, if you will, from an object service that you can start benefiting. Again, the size of the object store is much larger than what's available in the market today. You can go up to close to 20 terabytes. It's a petabyte scale overall object store with up to 20 terabytes large object size that we support. Complementing that is our announcement of going into EAP of our SQL service. So vCloud Air SQL, this is a managed pay-as-you-go database as a service. The unique part of this is an MS SQL database as a service. The unique part of this is, unlike SQL Azure, this is really the versions of SQL Server that you run on-prem. We're running that for you in the cloud. So it's 2008, 12 with plans for 14 is what we're going to make available. So this is identical back to the hybrid use case, the database you run on-prem, available as a service on the cloud. Solving some of the complex job of maintaining, patching, upgrading, backing up the databases, we're making that all available as a service. So you don't have to worry about the database and administrative task. You can focus on the development task. For your developers, being able to tap for a dev test use case, for example, spin up a database on demand, replicate data into the database, start to use it, shut it down when you're done, pay as you go, completely flexible, completely reliable, available on the vCloud Air. This is a very compelling offering that we're making available now. So if you haven't looked at it, definitely go and log into the website. If you have an EAP kicking off, have a look and sign up for it as well. One thing we've learned now, about a year and a half in, is we talked about hybrid. We talked quite a bit about VM compatibility, right? That was kind of a moniker. It's the same VM, ESX at the core, copied over, it works. What we realized very quickly is for the larger complex topologies, networking policies, security policies, firewalls start become the kind of the Achilles heel of trying to move a workload around. If you want to make a workload portable, it's not just about the compute, it's about the application definition, it's about your security policy, it's your network configuration. That's what really makes it hard to kind of lift your application landscape, if you will, and move it around. And a lot of the work we've had to do is in the area of advanced network services. And you can think of advanced network services really as taking NSX and making it available, the strength of NSX, making it available through vCloud Air, but adding things like multi-tenancy, adding advanced network services for layer 4 to 7 in terms of load balancers, et cetera, WAN acceleration capability. We're adding all of those richness on top of the NSX capability in a multi-tenant cloud environment. So you're starting to see that we have the notion of trust groups or micro-segmentation is now available. You can start to set up your security parameters so that your east-west traffic can be protected, not just your north-south as you put the firewalls in place. It is built natively at the VM level. It gives you the flexibility of having a completely secure environment in a shared multi-tenant cloud environment. The L2 extension capabilities we put in there are unique, and this is what many of our service provider partners are also leveraging to win against Azure and Amazon. So again, network services, a key differentiator capability for us, and it becomes that bridge I talked about in the picture before. So if you think about the island and the bridge, think of advanced network services as really providing that bridge to connect the on-prem enterprise to the cloud. Being able to describe security policy, profile as policies, and then being able to make those portable and be able to bind them at the time of deployment. So as your workload moves, your policies move with it. Being able to provide this zero trust kind of environment, particularly in a public cloud, as you start to meet your security and compliance rules. Very compelling technology that we're making available for our customers. We've talked quite a bit about the network side of it, but in order to move workloads very easily, people want to use the IT admins or the VM admins today, prefer to use the tools they have. Hybrid Cloud Manager is really the capability that allows us to extend our hybrid networking capabilities and make them natively available through a tool we call Hybrid Cloud Manager. This allows our customers to extend their on-prem data center into vCloud Air. It provides a tool by which they can create new resources, new VMs, and deploy them on vCloud Air. It also gives you the stretch connectivity I talked about, a layer to network segments that you can create from hundreds of network segments from the on-prem to single edge gateway in a virtual data center created on vCloud Air. So you can start to now, in a software-defined manner, start to define your network virtualization rules, extend your network, keep your same MAC addresses, keep your same IP addresses, particularly if you have some legacy applications. I bet you they have hard-coded IP addresses, which makes it very hard simply to move from one environment to another, particularly for DR availability use cases, or sometimes even for dev test. As you move from one environment to another, those things are hard-coded in your test environment. So when you move back to production, you had to write all kinds of scripts to try to inject all that kind of details and make those changes. You can make this very portable. So in order to drive this level of automation, this level of scale, you need the tools in place to be really successful. And particularly, we're seeing workload migration to vCloud Air is really enabled by Hybrid Cloud Manager. One of the big additions also, it's actually two big additions in addition to the kind of the networking capability, is being able to move large VMs. One of the challenges we had with vCloud Connector is it wasn't as efficient in terms of moving very large VMs. We have a large university on the East Coast that's moving almost half a terabyte of VMs from on-prem to cloud as they move their workloads from the on-prem data center to vCloud Air, where we become effectively their data center. In those cases, we've also now integrated things like WAN acceleration technology to optimize the movement of data. We've got things like checkpoint restarts in case a VM copy fails. It picks it up from where it started and continuing forward. So adding those kinds of availability, acceleration kinds of features is a key element of Hybrid Cloud Manager. So Hybrid Cloud Manager is a client-side piece, advanced network services that pipe, giving you kind of the LAN, you're making your WAN look like a LAN, making an extension of your data center, and being able to move data back and forth. And you saw that backplane is really what we're using for what Jan demonstrated earlier to do things like vMotion, right, across data centers. So this is the plumbing, if you will, that we're putting in place. This is the highway we're building, so you can start to unlock your existing on-prem data centers, your existing workloads in your on-prem data centers onto vCloud Air. So extremely compelling technology and some of the largest use cases for data center extension and how customers can leverage on-prem technology and vCloud Air in a hybrid use case is what we're seeing the most traction for. So this is where large pharma accounts, and I'll walk you through actual use case to make it really simple, is here's an example of an infrastructure extension use case. If you see on the left, you're the customer's data center. They typically have a 3-tier application. They have some common services, and they want to start leveraging vCloud Air. And the simplest use case you see often is you use a public cloud because of its elasticity to move the web tier into the cloud. You want to take the web tier, move it to the cloud, but your data at rest, your databases, et cetera, may be still sitting on-prem. You often start with some form of a dedicated cloud or a shared cloud environment. Many of our larger accounts, where we're kind of the extension of the data center, they're using a dedicated instance from vCloud Air. So they go procure a dedicated instance using SPP credits and starting to use the service. As they're doing so, they often either use VPN or they have a direct connect from the on-prem into the vCloud Air data center. So now you've kind of got the physical connectivity in place, you've got a capacity you've got available that you can use as you go, and now you have all these workloads you want to start migrating. They will potentially look at saying, let me just take the web tier and move it to the right-hand side. They'll extend the application, they'll extend the security and firewall rules, basically break the application where the web tier is sitting in vCloud Air. The backend databases are still sitting in the secure way on-prem. Between this connectivity and the security in place, you're starting to now have the DMZ in the cloud, where the on-prems providing you all the backend system of records and your existing application workloads, your system of records, if you will, sitting on the data center. This is a very common use case, and the challenge, people often say, hey, that network in the middle, that can be slow. What I found is anywhere between 80 to 100 milliseconds across two ends of the US is a very common data point. So as you start thinking about your application where you have 2-second latency, we're looking at maybe 1/20th of that barely being spent on the network. It starts to become really feasible. So this is a very common use case where you can pretty much keep your database licenses, which are very hard to put on the cloud, leave them where they are, create a web tier, start to access the data, and you can elastically scale your web tier based on your workload. Whether it's a seasonal workload or you need capacity, you can start to drive that and get the benefits of cloud and the elasticity of cloud. Very common use case. You can also then selectively start to move some of your other core services and migrate them over to vCloud Air. So this is an example of many of our largest customers starting to use us as a data center, starting to leverage the economics of the cloud while keeping some of the core assets sitting on-prem and driving the hybrid use case. So typically we talk about dev test as a hybrid. This is real production workload where applications are being stretched or extended to leverage the public cloud. And I would say this is a great example of what Bill talked about this morning as a hybrid application. This is a great example of another hybrid application, where an existing application is being split across 2 tiers or 2 different data centers. Another use case is customers simply don't want to be in the data center business. We're finding a couple of cases, particularly in the mid-market, where they just don't want to be in the data center business. They want to get out of the data center business, and they're looking to, again, similar use case, similar kind of connectivity, but move the entire workload over. And the workload being moved over is either happening at a VM level or happening at the complete application level. We've also just struck a partnership with a small company called VMware that is allowing us to do application level DR and replication, which also goes after physical and non-virtualized workload or third-party virtualization technology. As you start looking at data center migration, it's not just about VMware in your data center. You have stuff that's not virtualized, you have stuff that's sitting on other virtualization technologies. You need the ability to copy all of those and move it over. So combination of partnerships like VMware plus our infrastructure replication capability through Hybrid Cloud Manager and some of the work we've done here, you can start to see we can move complete workloads from on-prem to the cloud, replicating your VMs, your networks, your storage, your firewall rules, and your security policies, completely intact onto a vCloud Air environment. Not only that, many cases you may decide that some portion of that you want to bring back for whatever reason. You have complete portability. So this is not just a one-way street. You can move it back if you choose to. Again, it depends on your workload profile, et cetera. The same university I talked about started by using us for DR, then moved to dev test, now is moving some of the dev tests back to an OpenStack cloud on-prem and moving production workloads onto vCloud Air. So you may start at a single place, you may end up somewhere completely different. It will depend on what your business drivers are, what your customers' needs are, your location needs are, and you may start to make those choices. So you often think, I already know what my strategy is, it will change, right? As you start and you evolve, your customer needs change, your business needs change, you may decide to mix and match. And what you think today is kind of your use of the cloud may completely flip. So this is a really odd case because most people think of dev test as something on the public cloud. Here's a case where they're getting all the production static workload they want to move on to public cloud, free up capacity on-prem, and have the more dynamic workload that they're going to leverage internally using a private cloud they're building. So again, we're seeing a mix and match of both use cases leveraging this kind of technology. So I've touched quite a bit about infrastructure. This is kind of what VMware is very good at, right? This is where we can provide you this complete hybrid compatibility of compute, network, storage. We give you the ability to secure your policies. You can start driving this stuff. What often restricts people from application development is, how do I start to look at setting up my environment? And the big challenge is, before I start my environment, I need some templates, right? I need a set of templates that someone's maintaining, keeping current. One of the big changes or the additions we've made to the family is a partnership with Bitnami, where you have access to 100+ templates that they're maintaining and keeping current. Many of the organizations are starting to use open source technology. Those are the building blocks for how you're leveraging the cloud. You have a rich set of tools, both development tools, business applications, and infrastructure templates that you can single-click deploy from a Bitnami catalog to your private VDC. So this dramatically simplifies the ability to start your projects and have a toolkit and the templates that you need to be effective in getting your developers productive and get started. So this is kind of an enablement function. We often see this is the start of what people are looking for. A big ask has been, though, if I'm an IT, I want to start providing that self-service access to my developers. But I want to constrain what my goal images are for my developers. Every one of the IT architecture groups has a governance policies, a certified list of templates with instrumented management tools, security tools, patches, et cetera, that they want to maintain. In many of those cases, they're looking for a kind of an enterprise application catalog, a catalog by which they can define what services or what application templates, what goal templates that they have set up as standards, they want to make available to developers. What's in the works, and I showed this a little bit in the future, is if you go to the vCloud Air catalog today, you'll see a new tile up here. The tile in the middle we call the application catalog. The intent here is, again, these are mock-ups of something we're building. When you click the application catalog, you'll go to some privately curated catalog. And the privately curated catalog will have the set of templates that you've loaded and you made available. Again, you can use content library, as you saw earlier in the keynote demo, where you can have your on-prem catalog synced with the vCloud Air catalog. Again, the goal here is start to build your enterprise catalog templates, and start to have them set up by categories. So you should be able to go into any of these featured applications that you're publishing to your developers, you want them to start using. You'll be able to define them by categories. You may want to look at development tools. I'm a developer. That's all I care about. If I'm a business analyst, I'm looking for a different set of tools. I'm a data management or database administrator. I care about other templates. So first set of filtering would be based on categories. The second set of filtering will be just selecting by keyword, right? I'm looking for a Tomcat server. Give me the latest one or by a particular version. I can find it, I can select it, deploy, and I'm off to the races. We've also had a pretty good feedback where customers also want to know what's the price of this thing. Some things are free. The open source bits are definitely free. If you're an ISV in the audience and you want to start publishing your capability, the idea is I can now start promoting to the enterprise in the marketplace, in the enterprise catalog, my service, my value, my cost. The developer can start to see at any given time what that thing costs me. Do I want to use an open source version? Do I want to use something that an ISV vendor has published? You can start to see how we're bringing best of breed ISV solutions on the tap, curated by the enterprise, delivered to developers in a curated format. With all the information published on hand, so you can start to choose what services you want and what are relevant for your deployment. Once you've selected those, you can pretty much click and define either a single VM template, or typically if it's a 3-tier app, you have multiple VMs that make up your collection. And we do that today with the notion of VApps, and I'll show you later on how we're extending that to blueprints with some of our partners back there with Cloudify. So you can start to see, you start with the basic notion of a single image or VM, a collection of VMs through a VApp template, start to define your configuration, your late binding of resources, CPU, memory, et cetera. Back again, very different than our competitors, not forcing you into a t-shirt size. You have a pool, you carve it out, you as a developer know how many VMs you want to overcommit or how you want to leverage it, drive the efficiency in your own environment. Again, very consistent with the VMware model on-prem, bringing that same experience, but giving you that on-demand consumption model that you're looking for, right? So in this particular case, you go and deploy the VApp, you can then add a second image for a SQL Server and build a complete topology, or go make additional, upload your own templates. If you're a developer, you've made some modifications, you've had your own templates, you can upload those, you can make edits, you can make changes, et cetera. And the idea here is we want to give enough flexibility in the hands of the developer, drive towards that self-service experience, but IT is still in control. They have the visibility, they have the governance, they have the ability to provide a service provider type experience to the developers without having putting the constraints that typically you get from a traditional IT model. So as IT moves to a service model, this becomes critical, where they can be the man in the middle, brokering services, ensuring the governance, ensuring the security, but developers still have all the access. They're able to burn down things on a pay-as-you-go basis. They have the flexibility of picking the things they want, adding templates they need. And again, striking that right balance is what we're finding from enterprise IT. That's probably a big requirement for them. This just pretty much walks you through the multi-VM configuration, right? So again, a fully functional walkthrough, and you'll see this coming in the first half of next year as we start to build out a catalog and template and deliver that for you. So far we've touched on kind of the basic infrastructure use cases, right? Dev test, data center extension, DR, those are basic building blocks. We've talked about how do you start providing a way to get access to templates to get started. But the big thing for most developers is use of tools, particularly how you look at your tool chain for how you build applications. And the number one thing, if you move to a continuous development, is use tools like CI, right? If you're looking at a continuous integration model, by definition, you're basically looking to do check-ins. For every check-in, run some tests before you progress it to the next level. And you're probably using a tool like Jenkins, whether it's open source Jenkins or a commercial one from CloudBees. This is pretty much close to 90% of the market on the Unix side uses, on the Linux side, sorry, uses Jenkins as the default tool, whether it's coming from the vendor for support or the open source version. By definition, this is the platform. What we've effectively done here is allow you to use Jenkins and your configuration and deployment tools of choice, whether you're using Chef and Puppet to build your deployments, or using Ansible or SaltStack. It's your choice of how you configure your environment. We think about how do you provision an environment, how do you provision a template, how do you start writing application code and drive flexible development using tools like CI for continuous integration, but able to spin up builds on the cloud. A classic use case is you have multiple build farms. You don't want to have capacity pre-provision on-prem. You want to start running those build farms on a public cloud. Great use case where you can start having continuous integration in the build farms. For every commit, you spin up some tests. You can parallelize the workload depending on the size of your teams. End of quarter, end of project, you got everybody's running builds. You're in a constraint on your prem. You can just add more capacity. Some of the tools like Jenkins also allow you to manage multiple resource pools and manage the builds across multiple development teams. Again, varies what you're looking to do in the space, but there's a fairly rich set of capability available, and we've integrated that all with vCloud Air, giving you that hybrid deployment again. Those tests could run on-prem, those production builds could eventually end up on-prem, but you can start leveraging the fungible cloud resources for your continuous integration efforts, for your build efforts, for your testing efforts. Again, starting to move beyond just infrastructure to start providing what we call DevOps capability. And the core part of DevOps capability is you need automation. If you have human touch, if it's manual, you're going to break the chain. For every time you do a build, you want the environment created, you want to push the bits, you want things tested. If it goes well, it moves to the next step in the tool chain. And you can automate a lot of this stuff with the tools we have today and the integrations we've already put in place. Again, a key differentiation in our strategy versus the competitor is open, best-of-breed tools. Leveraging open source where you want, taking support from the best-of-breed vendors where you like. In this case, again, a good example of this is Jenkins or Chef or Puppet, depending on the tools you want. So a large ecosystem of partners enabling you to leverage the cloud, pre-integrated, making it possible for you to build your own tool chain of continuous integration. The orthogonal view of this is, hey, I don't want to even use some of these tools. I want to use a PaaS. So you have two frameworks today. You can use a DevOps tool chain, or you can use a platform as a service. The platform as a service, by definition, says, you give me code, I'll do the rest, right? You publish the piece of code, I'll deploy, I'll manage the full lifecycle. Kind of integrated DevOps is part of the PaaS platform. And so Cloud Foundry is a clear leader in this space, and we've got Cloud Foundry integrated now and available on vCloud Air as well. And the three use cases you see are pretty standard, right? You start to see dev tests being built using Cloud Foundry on vCloud Air, and then production workloads being put on vSphere on-prem. Or you may see two different types of application. Your web applications that are small, short-lived, being built using a PaaS approach, while your traditional tier 1 applications still running on-prem. Very common use case. Or third one is high scale. You may have an application that got built but needs to scale. One of the other benefits of PaaS, it gives you built-in elasticity. You don't have to worry about scaling the app. As your workload increases, you can simply ask it to grow up or shrink and give you that elastic consumption, elastic delivery, and you don't have to do any of that stuff. The PaaS platform has built-in load balancing, elasticity built into the solution itself. So again, we see customers looking at both forms of development style as they look to build new applications and extend the existing on-prem delivery. So it really comes back to what kind of environment you need to build, what's your sophistication look like, what kind of applications you're building, and what platforms you want to leverage. And from a vCloud Air perspective, our strategy is keep it open, provide the choice. I could almost add a third slide to this, which is the work we're starting to do with what Kit provided this morning, where we're going after containers. So you can look at this kind of the traditional VM deployment model. An increasing new trend is leveraging containers. Containers can be leveraged both as a deployment model, where the life cycle of how you do DevOps is changing, right? I package my entire stack as a part of a container, and I move my container through the phases versus building a stack using some config and provisioning tool, deploying my code on top of it, right? So think of the third use case of DevOps, or kind of the previous use case of DevOps, could easily be leveraged using containers. And this is where the Photon and the integrated containers with vSphere or the new Photon platform. Just think of this as another deployment choice where you can start using the same tools. The difference here being you're using Mesos, Kubernetes, et cetera. From an orchestration perspective, you may be using Circle CI as your CI tool versus CloudBees. Again, it'll vary, the tool chain may vary, but the approach is similar, right? You can start to use technology like this to get you the benefit from a DevOps perspective, how you start to build solutions in the cloud. So this was quite a bit about, hey, I'm starting to build applications, I've got the tool chain set up. Back to my first analogy, most cases when you're building a new app in the cloud, or cloud native app as we'll call it, it still needs access to data. And increasingly we're finding that if you've seen the acquisition of Parse by Facebook, right, that was a pretty good trend to say, what if I could simplify some of these common services, things like notification, like identity, like being able to access a backend resource. If I can simply have an API, my developers don't need to worry about it. In the new world of cloud native, you're starting to focus more on user experience, and your web developers simply don't need to worry about the complexity of where your data is coming from. And you're starting to see this emergence of what I call back-end services. We use this word mobile back-end services, but generally the idea is, how do I can create APIs for all my back-end services, decouple my front-end developers from the back-end infrastructure. You can think almost just like this SOA all over again, but the world this time it's more about RESTful services using standard HTTP, making it very easy for the designers to focus on experience, decoupling the back end from where integration happens. And what we've done here is, with a partner like Kinvey, we've taken their MBaaS services and made them available on vCloud Air. So if you have mobile projects, this is typically the entry point for most of our customers who are looking to start leveraging the cloud for new development, particularly for the enterprise workload, right? Mobile is the entry point for most of your cloud development efforts. You need a set of back-end services. Again, make it really easy. So DevOps plus MBaaS, to me, is your starting point, if you're an enterprise, of how you're starting to build net new applications. These are thin applications that you're building very rapidly, connecting to your back-end. These tend to iterate very quickly. You make these changes very often. You want it highly automated. You want it highly integrated. You want the tool chain pretty much integrated and built. You saw that again when Bill presented this morning, how we're starting to do that for myvmware.com and the application we had to build. The same applies for you as you start to look at your, whether it's your CRM apps, your Salesforce apps, your field-facing apps, your trouble ticketing app, whatever that application you need for your business users. This is a great framework by which you can start building your applications. So we've gone through now kind of the steps of, hey, I've got the data center extension in place, got infrastructure in place, I've got the tools in place for how I can build. I got the tool chain in place, whether CI/CD or using a PaaS. I've got a set of mobile backend services I can program to. How do I really now accelerate the deployment? The general myth out there is, everybody needs to become like Netflix or Yahoo, et cetera, right? Where everybody's pushing a change every day into production. How many of your operations team are ready to let you basically have a free-for-all and push things in production every day? We're not ready for that, right? Most enterprises are not ready for that. They want to have a release process by which you can move from some form of staging environment into production. And the big thing from this we're seeing is, as we start looking at the enterprises, it's no longer a simple environment. The topology or the description of my application is fairly complex. Working with our friends here with Cloudify, we've really focused on making blueprints a building block of the platform. Most of our customers saying, if you can create kind of an environment as a service, that would make my life very easy. What if I could get the environment created with a click of a button, with all the pieces that I need? Almost a way that people want to do with Docker, but more for a complex application environment, where there's relationship, there's sequence. I need to start the application database first before I can start my application, so it can connect, et cetera, right? Anytime you start up an application, there's some order or sequence. There's some relationship between the different tiers. There's a set of parameters you got to set up in terms of network configuration, JDBC ports, et cetera, et cetera. All of that configuration, what if you could do it declaratively? What if you could just kind of define a blueprint of what your application is, and then depending on that, you can make the thing portable. Our vision for blueprints is you can start to describe your application topology, your network topology, your security policies, all declarative, in a YAML type definition file that you can now move your workload seamlessly. I come from the old WebLogic Java days, right? The Java descriptor, or if you look at even the JDK, the notion of a Java code that was, write once, run anywhere, in a distributed world, in a multi-tier world, what is the equivalent of that? And hence, blueprints, our view is a way for making application workloads portable. VMs make infrastructure portable, or the simple application portable. Application blueprints make the complete application portable and make it easy to move around. And our goal here is to provide tools for you to come in and create your blueprints, submit your blueprints to a service that will automate the deployment and give you a ready-to-run environment. Extreme case of this is the acquisition of VirtuStream, which you heard again Rodney present today. Their application automation technology is built around a blueprint framework. They use JCloud as an approach. Our goal would be to standardize the blueprint format. The more we can standardize the blueprint format, you can have these cloud factories publish you automation templates that can deliver, and then we can drive the automation. Or your IT shop can start creating these blueprints that are your templates that you can make available in a catalog and make them available for your customers to deploy in a single click. This is the only way I see us moving out of the manual steps we're in and drive automation. It's better than hundreds of scripts I see today of Chef and Puppet. They're just hanging together with no context, no information model of how this all comes together. So we think blueprints are a way to organize yourself, and manage the complexity of deployment. So once you've got the environment set up, then it's really about the release pipeline, right? How do I go from an integrated development environment, use CI on the top of the funnel for my build and test. Once all the work is done, I package my bits into some kind of artifactory or some kind of a repo, or in any kind of technology that you prefer to use. Then you can then push it out to a release management tool, right? And the release management tool drives the environment and helps you move as you move through the different phases. And the key thing here is if you want to drive agility, each of these things can be a handoff, right? It has to be automated. It has to be identical. The shape and size may change. Your test environment for functional testing is going to be very different than your system test environment, but the configuration you want it to be identical. You may change the size of the VMs, you may change the scope, but you have to be able to move through this release train in an automated manner. And this is where the continuous delivery technologies are picking up steam. And at the end, it's really a release pipeline. A release pipeline that allows you to plug into third-party technologies, best-of-breed technologies again, and help you drive through the automation process. And this is what we've done is we've got 2 services now available. We have an investment in a small company called CloudMunch. We have them available as a service on vCloud Air. And we have our own product through our VRA, a product set called CodeStream, that's also working in this area. So again, back to the vCloud Air strategy, it's all about best-of-breed, giving you that choice, but having it pre-integrated so it dramatically simplifies your release train. And so if you're looking at delivering that, this is really the CodeStream use case where we can, again, use these application blueprints to help create the environments, push the application code through a CI/CD tool, and drive through production. We've seen dramatic reduction in terms of cycle time. Bulk of the cost in working on complex environments is spent break fix or setting the environment right. I run vCloud Air as a service. I'll tell you, half the time our issues are somebody in production made a change. We had configuration drift, and there was no way of telling what was running in production wasn't caught in staging. I would say a third of my issues today are related to this configuration drift. So only we could solve this problem is if we can create gold images, drive automation, and consistency with very little touch as you move from the different stages into production. And even our service like ours, we have these kind of gaps still we're working through to drive the automation. And tools like these are becoming kind of the norm by which we push out code on a regular basis. If you're looking for an agile delivery model, you haven't started to look at your DevOps practices, look at CI/CD, look at leveraging the cloud as a fungible resource that you can tap on demand, and then drive the exercise using blueprints, et cetera, as a way to automate your lifecycle. So we've covered quite a bit of the cycle in terms of the steps it takes. We hear quite a bit about security. And the thing with security usually comes in 3 buckets. First bucket is data at rest. If I got data sitting there, is it encrypted? And for folks who have seen kind of the roadmap items, we partnered with HITRUST to provide you kind of a security solution or encryption solution for things in the VM. With the future direction, if you've seen some of the SDDC roadmap, we're going to make it easier for you to encrypt data and provide you native security in the core platform itself. So first is clearly we would have data in rest, right? Second set of security typically is leveraging VPN or some direct connect or some secure way of moving data in flight. But the most hardest part is how do I protect the edge, which has been the typical security model, right? The typical security model is I'll put firewalls at the edge, I'm comfortable. There is no longer the edge. Protecting the edge is no longer the option. You have to protect almost at the VM level, at the core level. Because intrusion detection at any given time could basically make it open for you to come in through one VM as a shared service, particularly in a cloud. The biggest thing we worry about is if you compromise a tenant VM and they're able to use that to log into other customers, tenants, VMs, et cetera. We've applied NSX. We're probably the poster child of NSX in terms of vCloud Air. And we're starting to leverage this capability to start to drive security and compliance. Being able to provide very fine-grained policies and controls, being able to segment the network at a software level through policies, being able to do it natively in the VM, and being able to protect every VM makes the surface area much harder to attack. And when you get compromised, you're only compromising a small piece versus the entire network, right? So you can start to see the need for paying specific interest to network security and policies, being able to apply that in your deployment, and being able to leverage in a software-defined way with a central policy management and be able to publish that and make it application workload specific is where the market is going. Being able to define a collection of objects, serve application components and saying that's a landscape. I want to protect that landscape. I want to move the landscape. I want to secure that landscape. I want my firewall rules to move as I move my workload. This is really what the market is moving towards. And it's enabled with it's a primary application of using security at the network level and the application policy at the blueprint level. You bring the two together, you now have a portable description and a software-defined way for binding your policies to your specific implementation. By abstracting away from the physical infrastructure to a software layer, it makes it possible to move that workload around, right? So as we start talking about all of these hybrid cases, they're enabled by unlocking the dependency on the physical infrastructure. It has to get virtualized. It has to get abstracted away. It has to be more descriptive. It has to be able to kind of bind, have late binding attributes. So when I deploy, I can inject those security policies. I can bind to the network policies. That's really where the market is going. And if you can't get that infrastructure in place, you'll be landlocked, right? You'll be locked to your existing environment or to your existing cloud provider, which is not good for your business. It doesn't drive agility, right? So this is really where we see start investing in the infrastructure, start to drive towards this portable world, and you'll see a tremendous benefit around that. And in particular, if you see the details behind this, it's really the ability to kind of do this per VM firewall and isolation, right? And the firewall containers can be linked to apps, can be linked to MAC addresses, could be linked to a grouping of objects. Making these rules portable is a key part of it, and then having predefined templates that come out of the box, whether they come from VMware or come from your security teams, allows you to start carrying those policies. The same policies that you have on-prem, completely portable and manageable and delivered on vCloud Air, because it's just an extension of your data center, right? As far as your customer is concerned, as your app is concerned, it's really one virtual data center that's an extension of your current footprint. You can reduce the risk, as I talked about, to spread incidents, isolation of what I call the east-west traffic versus just the traditional north-south, being able to centralize your security policies and being able to publish them and drive compliance visibility across the environment, right? And again, this goes hand in hand with your CI/CD practices. Once you have the infrastructure programmatically being configured, you can start to drive the automation at the application level and start doing continuous delivery. So these things don't go in isolation. You need application level automation in your delivery tool chain, but you also need infrastructure automation. If you don't bring them together, you bring a manual step in and you break the release cycle. And you got to drive automation at both levels, infrastructure and software, to realize the benefits of cloud or the agility of cloud that we often talk about. It's great to do this in these small one-off applications. The Amazon example of a simple web app being delivered, that's great, but that's not the reality of enterprise. Those enterprise apps are connected, they're integrated, they're secure, they need to manage the security policies and compliance of the enterprise, and you have to deliver that in an integrated manner. And these technologies are the building blocks. They're already part of your infrastructure. Leverage them, use them, make them part of your solution going forward. So in a nutshell, if you really look at where we are, is you have the ability to take your on-prem data center, add capacity on demand, very simple use case. You can use this as a DR site, either at the VM level or application level. You are starting to see by moving towards application portability, we can start to do application DR. You saw the announcement of SRM Air in the roadmap session. I think we talked a little bit more about it, where you can start defining your runbook, so you can orchestrate a complex multi-tier topology and then drive that DR orchestration, which is where the SRM capabilities are being brought to bear on our DR side. You're able to extend for both existing apps, breaking the DMZ web tier from the backend tier, if you like, or moving the entire application and eliminate their data center. That's what we see in the middle. And then you're able to secure them using advanced network services, our high availability services, as well as some of the work we just talked about. So all in all, vCloud Air is set up, in our view, to be that enterprise cloud solution for you. It has all the tenets of a pure public cloud. It has all the abilities of an enterprise cloud, and it's a seamless extension of what you already use, your same policies, your same infrastructure, and makes it really easy to adopt. So hopefully you've got a sense that if you're already not using vCloud Air, you should give it a try. If you're not using vCloud Air for a particular reason, it's probably because your guys don't know about it or your team hasn't really tried it out. Because it's simply, for a VMware customer, it's the easiest way to unlock the value of leveraging public cloud from a data center perspective, right? And so to make that easy, what we've really done is made sure there's a whole bunch of sessions that give you a detail of what's going on. So if you want to know more about the blueprinting service, on Wednesday, I think Paco and some of the folks from Cloudify are presenting that. to give you an example how to create a blueprint or a template and orchestrate through that. We have a deep dive on our networking services, a hybrid HCM, and our advanced network services. Phenomenal technology, groundbreaking. I would highly recommend attending that one. We've got an object store update that tells you the S3 type API compatible object store, gives you persistence for backup, file store, etc. Again, makes it easy for developers and for operations. A cheap bin bucket, bit bucket in the cloud where you can throw stuff minimally as you start to look at applications, many disposable applications, or even collecting your web logs that you want to run analytics on. So great number of use cases. Highly recommend you look at that one. Database as service, I think Raja and Machado are sitting there. They'll be walking through and probably providing a good update of what vCloud SQL Air looks like today and our roadmap where we're going, particularly adding database DR and some of the features in that space as well. And then mobility, we've got a whole bunch of use cases around Kinway and our MBAS services, how we can build mobile apps. So for every one of the talks I've had, if I've teased you enough, go spend some time, learn more about it, get to the next level of detail, and see how we can start applying that. Again, we have resources on vcloud.vmware.com if you want to get started. And if you want to start building an app, Kinway has a free offer where you can go in and try out and build an application pretty quickly. And you'll start to see how easy it is to get started and leverage the benefits of the cloud. If that's not enough, we've also thrown in an offer where if you sign up, you get $600 of free trial. Just start trying all of this technology, whether it's from a partner, from us. We encourage you to start really leveraging this and get ahead of the curve. If you're not going to be doing this, your developers are, and they're probably doing it in a rogue way, I would say IT should take control again, provide a standardized way for delivering this value. And these credits will give you a good sense of learning the technology, applying the skills, and starting to see how you can take control and start driving the change in your organization. And if you're a developer type, which is probably rare in the VM world, that's probably not a normal audience, but if you're the kind who likes to do a little bit of coding, you want to try a hackathon, this is our first. We have a hackathon scheduled for this Wednesday. It's an opportunity for you to kind of see what kind of IT ninja skills you have if you're a kind of a puppet master and you're starting to build scripts, et cetera, or you're a developer looking to do other application development, leveraging vCloud Air or the MBAS services, et cetera. And the prizes are 5 backstage passes being given out for the Wednesday event, as well as a Epiphone electric guitar signed by some of the members, right? And then a couple of other prizes, et cetera. So decide where you want to get started on your journey to cloud, pick the appropriate use case, and get started. And we have the credits and the promos to make it easy for you. We have a whole bunch of product managers from my team also floating around. So if you need help, if you want to get started, you have some questions on our roadmap, you'd like to dig into a specific area, we can also arrange a one-on-one session if required as we work with you. So I have a few minutes left. I'll stop here, see if anyone has questions. I'll take a few questions. If not, thank you again for being a great audience. Questions? Put everyone to sleep? Wake up? All right, well, thank you. Have a great VMworld. Yeah, appreciate it.